freshman Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib creating a new controversy over her comments about the Holocaust while discussing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
There's a kind of a calming feeling, I always tell folks, when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, their human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out on some people's passport. I mean, just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews.
President Trump and Republicans are slamming Tlaib as anti-Semitic and want Nancy Pelosi to take action against the Congresswoman, but Tlaib is refusing to back down. She's responding by saying critics are twisting her words in an effort to silence her, and Pelosi tweeting, Republicans' desperate attempts to smear Rashida Tlaib and misrepresent her comments are outrageous. President Trump and House GOP should apologize to Representative Tlaib and the American people for their gross misrepresentations. We'll take this around the table. Greg, do you think the Republicans hit the mark here or maybe missed it?
You know, this is terrible for a Monday because you're forcing me after a calm weekend to have to defend this lady.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to defend her and then I'm going to criticize her. First of all, the outrage over the Holocaust phrasing is distracting from her actual legitimate mistake about history. She didn't find the Holocaust calming. She said she found the idea of Palestinians providing safe haven to be calming. So this is no different than the fine hoax myth where people thought that Trump was talking about white supremacists and Antifa when he was actually talking about the debate over the monuments. So that's wrong. They're misinterpreting her. They're taking it out of context. And we should all have sympathy for her because people do that to us on the Five all the time. They'll take something we say, whether it's a joke, and then they'll put it up on a blog and say, Jesse says everybody should die. And you were talking about your hair, that you dye your hair. So that outrage is is misplaced. But her claim that the Palestinians were open arms about this, that's the troubling part. And I'm not a historian. I don't know enough about this, but I read up on it. I mean, the Palestinian leaders were collaborating with Hitler, right? They prevented safe haven for a lot of people who ended up dead. So her history is what's the outrage. The Republicans should focus on that and not about pulling an out-of-context thing, the calming word, which is kind of cheap.
Which gave her an opportunity to say, Lisa,
yes,
that her words were taken out of context.
But I think part of the reason is that she doesn't really deserve the benefit of the doubt. And the reason she doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt is it's not just the words that she chooses to use that are under scrutiny. It's also the policies that she chooses to support. She supports a one-state solution. She's also been called out by members of her own party for supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and Bradley Schneider said that basically is asking for the elimination of Israel. So it's not just the words that she's using, it's her policies that she supports. And if you want to look at an area where the Democratic Party is deeply divided, it's on the issue of Israel. I mean, remember Steny Hoyer going to the AIPAC stage and calling out Omar and Tlaib and these freshman members of Congress and their progressive viewpoints that many view as anti-Semitic.
There was an opportunity, Juan, for the House Democrats to pass an anti-Semitism resolution. They decided not to do that. Let me read to you President Trump's tweet about this. He said, Representative Tlaib is being slammed for her horrible and highly insensitive statement on the Holocaust. She obviously has tremendous hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. Can you imagine what would happen if I ever said what she said and says?
You know, I'm just flummoxed by this. It seems to me, we talk about Tlaib creating controversy. It seems to me the Republicans are creating controversy and President Trump is taking the lead because he sees some political advantage in this and trying to portray and smear her as somehow anti-Semitic. I mean, we can have arguments about the history, totally legitimate, but I just take my hat off. Greg, exactly right. This woman was talking about the potential bond between Palestinians and Jews, something you almost never hear about, because she said, in fact, who had to give up their land, not voluntarily. She made that very clear, not voluntarily. But people who gave up land to create the safe haven that is Israel for Jews post-Holocaust. That's what she said. And yet here we are back to the same old refrain that somehow the first Palestinian American in the Congress, along with a woman who's come from Somalia or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Latina woman, women of color, somehow demonized here conveniently, not only by Trump, but by the number 2 and number 3 Republicans in the House, again, for political advantage. To me, I think this is excessive. I don't think this is right. I don't understand how it's going on.
But it's not just them. I mean, I I learned my history today from all places. CNN. I mean, CNN, John King took her to task with historians. That's where I am. I'm going like, it was her history was wrong, but anyway.
And then, but because of all of this, so this is what she tweeted, Jesse. Policing my words, twisting and turning them to ignite vile attacks on me will not work. All of you who are trying to silence me will fail miserably. I will never allow you to take my words out of context to push your racist and hateful agenda. The truth will always win. And what I think about that is that, but the truth on the history side, that's where the truth should lie.
Right. Well, someone very smart one time told me never to invoke the Holocaust unless you absolutely have to. Because you never want to use it in an analogy. You never want to compare your political opponents to Hitler or to Nazis. And you definitely don't want to compare the suffering of Jews during the Holocaust to the suffering of any other people. And she kind of almost did that in a way. So the fact that Jesse Waters is giving advice to anybody else on how not to be offensive, let that sink in, Representative Tlaib, because we've come a long way. But looking at the context of what she said, she was more clumsy than she was anti-Semitic. But there was a little anti-Semitism strain in there, and that's about revising the history of the Holocaust. And it's a slippery slope, because when you talk about what Greg said, the Palestinian leadership did not welcome the resettlement of the Jews with open arms.
That's what she said.
They met with Adolf Hitler. They sided with Adolf Hitler. And then since that time period, the Palestinians and the entire Arab world has tried to exterminate the Jewish people. If you look at anything that anybody said in Iran, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, that's their entire agenda. That's what people have trouble with, her whitewashing history. And then when she's attacked for it, saying, oh, you know, I will not be silenced.
Can I add just for the bigger thing, because this happens a lot. We see this, the Republicans will straw man an argument after the Democrats straw man an argument when they hear a quote by somebody on the Five, right?
Right. It was not a great quote.
Yeah, and then you seek the worst possible interpretation of a quote. This is the contagion that the media has infected the world with, which is that when you say something, I'm going to think that it's the worst. The left does it to us, we do it to them.
And the Washington Post, who actually defended her here, is guilty of the exact same thing that Republicans do all the time, and now they're on their high horse talking about context. But they always remove context when they attack Republicans.
But it's also beyond just this statement alone. As I mentioned before, you have Democrats on her side of the aisle calling her out for the policies that she supports. The Zionist Organization of America recently called on the Democratic Party to kick her out, kick her off committees. They name terrorists and sympathizers that she associates herself with. So I think this is much deeper than just this simple comment.
So in other words,
I'm telling you, this is what the Zionist Organization of America said.
Everybody is this way or that way, and you're with the Zionists, and
well,
the Zionists
are to be taken. Do you support the BDS movement?
Are you kidding me? I don't. No, I don't. But I'm trying to say you can't trust the Zionists to go after Tlaib. This is. But again, I'm sure that morning newspapers will say, "Well, President Trump tweeted about it, so we've got to say." Representative Tlaib creates a controversy. No, Trump created the controversy, and the Republicans created it.
But see, you just did the same thing you're accusing her of.
Well,
it doesn't have to be. You don't have to have two polarizing positions.
It is in this situation. I know we all sat here and said the woman was taken out of context.
She was sloppy, and she got taken to the woodshed for it. That's all it is.
Well, and that was our A block. Bill Nye.